Most of the earliest tomato plants have just been transplanted into the bed of this polytunnel, which is a bit early for this warm season crop, but too late for these particular plants. We sowed the seeds of 2 early varieties several weeks or even a month before the others, with the aim of getting a really early crop. But there were a few problems with this strategy, and the plants ended up being quite big and stressed going into the ground. The main issue was that we had to wait for the early spring crops that were occupying the bed to be finished before we could transplant in the tomatoes. We should have started transplanting some of these tomato plants as soon as the fastest of the spring crops was finished, including the radishes, rocket, and pak choi. If we had done this, most of these tomato plants would have been in the ground 10 or 12 days earlier, which would have helped, instead of waiting for them to get even more stressed before going ahead anyway. We had also upgraded the heated propagation space so that these tomato plants grew faster than expected in the warmer conditions. We eventually pulled the plants out of this heated space and set them in the side of the polytunnel so that they would not grow so quickly. This didn't help as much as expected, as we had unusually warm weather for the past few weeks, so the tomato plants kept growing anyway. In hindsight, we could have easily delayed sowing by a few weeks, or turned down the temperature of the propagation space, or we could have put the plants in a cooler environment earlier to slow them down, or we could have spent the time and resources to transplant them into even bigger pots. In the end, these plants were quite tall and stressed, and have been in their pots for too long, and needed extra attention to keep watered and fed. But tomatoes are quite resilient plants, and with proper care, they will probably do quite well, and it is possible that the stress might have encouraged them to produce fruit even earlier. There are still a few plants of this batch waiting for the crop of Japanese turnip to be harvested before they can be planted into the ground, probably in another 4 or 5 days. Now I'm thinking I should really start transplanting the later batches of tomato plants into those sections of the other beds that are starting to be cleared of the early crops, to get them in the ground as soon as possible. And I need to remember to adjust the sowing and expected transplant dates for next year to take account of the warmer propagation space, so that we can still get early spring crops and also get the tomatoes in the ground before they get too big.